You ready? Dim the lights, let curiosity breathe, and step through the next door with me. Click subscribe, ring the bell. Let's keep the fire stoked for the next chapter. You stir before you truly wake, surfacing from a dream into a darkness that smells of smoke, sour wine, and something vaguely medicinal. Welcome back. This isn't a bedroom so much as a box. For damp walls, no window, barely room to stretch without greeting the plaster. Call it Rome's version of work from home. If home were a broom closet and your job came with oil, rouge, and strangers' footsteps at all hours, a straw mattress sighs under you, alive with the occasional flea battalion. In the corner, a dented bronze mirror, a cracked comb, a smear of chalky face powder, a stub of perfume that pretends to be luxury. If an oil lamp still sits where you left it, tonight counts as a win. Privacy, that's a modern fantasy. Here, walls whisper, doors are decoration, and knocks are optional. Business hours begin whenever someone decides they do. You sweep, not because it changes the world, but because yesterday's dust and someone's forgotten sandal feel like an accusation. You're tidying a stage you didn't design, prepping for a play you can't leave. A client once muttered that you looked charmingly awake. You replay it like a hymn. In this little cellar, tiny words become talismans. Hygiene waits outside. No private bath, no marble basin. Just a city that dumps its secrets in the gutters and still worships perfection carved in stone. If time is tight, and it always is, you head for the nearest fountain. Splash, rinse, hope the water hasn't just washed a chicken. Maybe you've scored a pinch of natron, gritty, stinging, the kind of clean that scrapes off skin and pride alike. If coins jingle and the day is slow, you drift to the baths, the great Roman equalizer. Soldiers, merchants, philosophers debating loudly about hemorrhoids, all steam together. You undress, tuck your belongings into a niche you trust far too much, and step into tepid water laced with other people's afternoons. Sweat in the caldarium, scrape yourself with a curved strigil, and enjoy the fleeting sensation of being the cleanest soul on your street. It lasts 5 minutes, maybe 6 if the wind's kind. Back at the mirror, you paint resilience on like armor. Chalk to mute the exhaustion, rouge to fake a flush you don't feel, kohl to frame eyes that have already seen 3 senators and a sailor before lunchtime. Perfume, thick enough to register as flammable, fights whatever the man behind you in line rolled in. You're not aiming for beautiful. You're aiming for better than the next option. Clothes finish the message. Rome loves costumes. For you, it's the female toga, a blunt declaration, a uniform that says what your mouth doesn't need to. Respectable matrons glide in stolas. You wrap yourself in the garment the law and custom pinned to your trade. Fabric can be a sentence, and tonight it reads plainly. Then the day accelerates. A knock, a barked name, a door shoved wider than you wanted. Conversations are short, negotiations shorter. Some men want softness, some want a performance, some just want quiet company in a world that never shuts up. You adapt because survival is a talent nobody pays you for but everyone demands. Between visitors, you breathe in rhythms. You form a half-smile you may never feel. You remind yourself that this is not all you are, just the role you're paid to play. The cellar is a cocoon and a cage, a place where you fold your dignity small enough to tuck in the corner and still have enough left to pick up at dusk. And always, judgment hangs in the air like incense gone stale. Rome adores gossip almost as much as gladiators. Eyes slide over you in daylight, curious, condemning, calculating, but coin still changes hands in the shadows. Hypocrisy pays better than honesty here. Yet there is a strange power in knowing the city's pulse from the underside. You hear secrets in murmured afterthoughts, feel the tremor of politics in the way men drink, sense fortunes turning by the cut of a cloak. You're closer to the truth than marble villas will ever admit. So dim your lights, friend. Let the fan hum, let your body loosen. You're lying there, but you're also here. In a cramped Roman cellar, an oil lamp flickering, perfume biting at your nose, a bucket you'd rather ignore lurking by the door. You're rinsing your face at a fountain that reflects the moon and a plucked chicken in equal measure. You're stepping into a bath where philosophers argue over nothing while you quietly reclaim a fragment of yourself with every scrape of the strigil. This is how a day begins and ends for one of Rome's working women. With grit, with routine, with a sliver of pride sharpened into a weapon. Not glamorous, not tragic, simply human, breathing inside a system that was never built for gentleness. Stay with me. There are more corridors to wander, more hidden rooms in history to curl up inside. Tonight is only the first step. Close your eyes if you like, your mind can keep walking. We'll move through time softly, truth in hand, weaving stories that soothe even as they awaken something curious, something quietly unbreakable. In you. Whenever you're ready, whisper where you're listening from. Tell me what hour your clock insists upon. It's strangely comforting, isn't it? Knowing that across oceans and time zones, someone else is dimming a lamp, turning the fan on low, and letting Rome's night wrap around them like a borrowed toga. Now breathe. The city is still buzzing above your head. But in here, the lamp is steady, and the straw mattress has finally stopped rustling. Let history hold you for a while. We'll pick up the thread again, and again until sleep takes you gently by the hand. You pull that fabric over your shoulders and feel it announce you before you speak. Not the stola, the layered, modest armor of wives who quote bedtime as a virtue and dowries as destiny, but the toga. The same sweeping silhouette senators swagger in, twisted into a loud, bright shorthand for, "I'm not a matron. I'm open for negotiation." In Rome, clothes don't just cover. They confess. Proper women glide in stolas, signaling household authority and early curfews. You, by law and custom, you're denied that uniform and steered towards something flashier, shorter, impossible to miss. Think beacon, not drapery. Elegance is optional. Visibility is oxygen. When 20 other women orbit the same 100 paces of cobblestone, subtlety is a luxury you can't afford. So you sparkle cheaply, cleverly. Bronze bangles that jingle, glass beads that mimic gems, earrings that swing like punctuation marks on every turn of your head. Sandals slap the stones, or maybe you go barefoot when coins run thin and comfort evaporates. Your feet will carry you, stand you up, run you away if the wrong temper flares. No one designed this wardrobe with rest in mind. Hair becomes theater. You curl it, dye it, or crown yourself with a wig dragged all the way from Gaul. Golden strands that scream exotic in a city obsessed with novelty. A blonde head here is like fancy imported soap. Overhyped, overpriced, but irresistible because someone hauled it across miles. Then the face. Pale chalk to ghost out the exhaustion. Rouge to fake warmth. Thick kohl to frame eyes that have seen far too much before noon. You're not trying to be a masterpiece, just the sharpest stroke on the wall. In a city edging a million souls, your look is your business card, your billboard, your shouted name in fabric form. If strangers glance and think, bold, scandalous, for hire, you've nailed the brief. Dressed, painted, perfumed, maybe still tasting last night's wine. Now comes the real dance. Being noticed in a culture that pretends to blush at what it pays for daily. There's no pamphlet to leave on a bench, no forum post to pin, no neat little brand kit. You are the brand. You have to be seen, heard, remembered, or etched into a wall by someone with a good time and a sharper stylus. Location is strategy. If you're stationed in a lupanar, the architecture itself hustles for you. Doorways flung open near bathhouses, markets, taverns. Anywhere bodies grow sweaty, bored, or impulsive. Call it ancient foot traffic optimization. You lean in the threshold, toga blazing, voice ready with flattery, bargaining, and limited time offers. 2 denarii if you're quick. Rent is due. The woman 6 steps to your left just dropped to 1. Desperation has volume, and everyone can hear it. Freelancers roam. Temples? Temptation loves proximity to piety. Taverns? Tipsy legionaries clink coins and drop standards. You surf the edges of vice and virtue, catching the moment someone wants a body more than they want to pretend they don't. And then there's the graffiti, the Pompeian masterclass in street marketing. Brothel walls splattered with unfiltered reviews. Maritimus gave me the time of my life. Felicia, 2 denarii. fast service. It's crude, funny, brutal, and effective. Some women pay a hand to scrawl their name and specialty somewhere conspicuous. Others let clients memorialize the moment. For better or for, she robbed me blind. Ancient Yelp, no stars, all scars. Public, permanent, and weirdly profitable. Survival, you learn, hinges as much on publicity as performance. If no one knows your name, your rate, your rumored enthusiasm, that coin lands in someone else's palm. Rome runs on stories. You make sure yours is loud enough to buy bread. Talent matters, sure, but a rumor spreads faster. Sometimes good PR outpaces good technique. Now to the ledger pricing. No guild, no safety net, no sisterhood of standardized rates. It's raw supply and demand, a daily tug-of-war between what your time is worth and what a man decides he can haggle it down to. Money, bread, favors, anything that can clink or crumble becomes currency. The market is free, people say. Free to judge you while buying you, free to barter your body down with a stale loaf because he's short a coin. You know the script, but you're not a puppet. Every word pitched, every laugh half-faked, every eyebrow tilted just enough. That's strategy. That's psychology. You read faces the way philosophers read scrolls. You sense which hook to throw. A whisper of mystery, a flash of defiance, a gentle nudge to a bruised ego. Behind the painted lips is a mind tallying risk and reward. A survivor navigating a city that refuses to admit how much it needs you. So breathe. Feel the soft hum in your room, the fan in our world, the lamp in yours. You're wrapped in fabric that tells your truth without your tongue. You're standing in a doorway that doubles as a stage. You're carving space in a city that sells everything and forgives nothing. Let that settle as your eyelids grow heavy. You're learning while you drift, sliding through time with the ease of a sigh. We'll keep walking these alleys together. Quiet steps, sharp eyes, turning history's harsh edges into something that soothes without lying. When you wake, you'll remember the color of that toga, the scrape of the strigil, the laugh scrawled on a wall in Pompeii. And you'll know you were there, for a heartbeat, inside the hum of Rome's underbelly, seen, loud, alive. Now, tell me, where are you listening from, and what hour claims you tonight? Somewhere out there, another lamp dims, another mind leans in. The mystery keeps unfolding, and you're part of it. Close your eyes. We'll pick up the thread on the next breath. You count the coins before you count your breaths. One as, maybe two, little bronze discs that wouldn't even buy a decent cup of wine. Yet they're what keeps your lamp lit and your landlord indifferent. Some days, payment isn't metal at all. A heel of bread, a pair of worn sandals, a promise scribbled in the air like it has weight. In a city drowning in currency, IOUs still float. Survival isn't romantic. It's creative. Then there's the other world, the marble tier, where meretrices glide like luxury brands in human form. Silver denarii clink for them, sometimes several in a single appointment. Not because they're merely desired, but because they sell more than skin. A song, a witty line of poetry, a lesson in Greek verbs, the illusion that a man's taste is as refined as his appetite. Talent becomes garnish. Presentation is the meal. Niches? Oh, absolutely. The clever ones carve out specialties like stall space in a market. Sailors just ashore? That's your crowd. Erotic dance with a flourish? Your signature. Reciting verse mid-embrace? Someone paid extra for that once and talked. The more singular your brand, the harder you are to replace. Repeat clients might get a discount or a raised eyebrow and full price if they reek of cabbage and regret. And if you're under a Leno or Lena, pimp, madam, parasite with a ledger, the best slice of your earnings vanishes before you touch it. Some women aren't even allowed to keep the crumbs. Enslaved bodies don't receive wages, only rations and the dangling carrot of freedom if fortune ever tips their way. The Roman lottery rarely pays out. Step into the lupanar, then Rome's brothel, equal parts maze and marketplace. Lupanar from lupa, she-wolf, a term that scratches rather than soothes. 2 stories of narrow corridors wedged between bathhouses and bars, perfect for intercepting half-drunk senators and sailors who confuse loneliness with philosophy. Rooms line a dim hallway, stone slabs topped with thin mattresses, curtains instead of doors, the soundtrack of someone snoring on the other side of your wall. Privacy is a rumor rich matrons repeat to each other over figs. You're not alone. A proper house has several women rotating shifts, plus the omnipresent Leno/Lena barking orders. Hurry, he matters. Clients drift in like weather. Teenagers with shaking hands, legionaries sweating cheap wine, balding officials insisting this is purely academic. Some are gone quicker than a dropped denarius. Others linger to dissect their poetry, which is somehow worse. Between visits, you sit at the entrance, perfecting the expression that says, "I'm playful, but my soul is napping," while you call out deals like a street vendor. Volume is strategy. 2 coins, today only. I'll pretend to listen. And the walls talk. Graffiti is everywhere. Pompeii's immortal comment section. Felix was here. Twice. Thais gives a good time. Crude drawings too. Proportions questionable, confidence absolute. Some women pay for their names to be etched where foot traffic is thick. Others let patrons carve their satisfaction or rage into plaster. Ancient marketing, loud, visual, permanent. But not everyone clocks in under a tiled roof. Taverns, the Caponi and Papini, offer the open-plan chaos of a startup with more vomit and fewer shares. You pour watered wine into grimy cups for men who wouldn't notice the difference even if you served nectar. With your other hand, you flirt just enough to keep coins flowing, but not enough to spark a dagger fight, unless the spectacle helps business. Taverns reek gloriously. Boiled cabbage, fish sauce, stale sweat. A perfume that clings to your tunic and your patience. Yet that stink is leverage. 2 more coins and I'll pretend you don't smell of garum. Back rooms and upstairs alcoves turn these places into part-time brothels with table service. No curtains here, just shadows and a prayer the owner looks the other way. All of this pricing, positioning, performance isn't just commerce. It's psychology. You read faces like fortune tellers read palms. Scarcity, urgency, validation, words you never say aloud but wield like tools. Hook the lonely with softness, the arrogant with challenge, the bored with novelty. Rome buys what it feels, not what it needs. You sell the feeling. So as you settle under your blanket tonight, hear the jingle of coins, the scrape of styluses on plaster, the murmur of bargains whispered under torchlight. Smell the garum, the wine, the fear, the perfume heavy enough to ignite. You're inside it now, Rome's undercurrent, watching how a million-person city polices virtue with one hand and pays for desire with the other. Let the rhythm soften you. Your eyes can close, your curiosity doesn't have to. We'll keep threading this labyrinth slowly, truth in one palm, imagination in the other. When morning finds you, remember the she-wolf's den, the bronze coin that couldn't buy wine, the silver that bought a song, the graffiti that outlived its authors. Before you drift, whisper your city, your hour. Somewhere, another listener just dimmed their lamp. Another mind is stepping quietly through a narrow hallway lined with stone beds and rough laughter. History's not a lecture here. It's a lullaby with teeth. Sleep. We'll meet at the next doorway. You slide back into the noise with a smile that's half invitation, half armor. Some nights it isn't even about bodies. It's company, lap-sitting, a murmured, "Your toga looks clean." In Rome, that counts as flattery. Coins hit your palm before anything else. Because, "I'll pay you tomorrow" doesn't buy bread. If a hand hovers over a purse too long, you raise your voice, let a warning curl off your tongue, or beckon the bouncer. A retired gladiator with one eye, a web of scars, and zero tolerance for delayed payments. The tavern hustle has its perks. More faces, more chances at a decent tip, but you're a waitress, therapist, and hostage negotiator in the same minute, and nobody tips for emotional labor. Dice clack against wood. A lyre player butchers a melody. Drunks shout about who invented democracy, and someone in the corner argues with a wall. The air tastes of watered wine, boiled cabbage, fish sauce, and old sweat. Unpredictable, exhausting, and just lucrative enough, provided no one empties their stomach on your sandal first. Too restless for a Leno's leash and too sharp to choke on tavern fumes? Then you take the riskier road, freelance. Independent. Or, as the magistrates like to phrase it, public disorder in thin sandals. Rome's streets pulse with opportunity and sewage in equal measure. Outdoor workers, prostibuli, prowl alley mouths, hover by bathhouse doors, haunt marketplaces, and sometimes linger on temple steps. Because nothing says, blessing from Venus, like a whispered discount beneath her statue. Daylight is crowded and dangerous. You sidestep gawkers, nosy magistrates with wax tablets, and matrons who swear you ruined their husband's self-control. Spoiler, you didn't. So you dress like a flare, short tunic, jangling jewelry, maybe a wig spun from imported German hair, less modest drape, more spot me from across the Circus Maximus. Approaching a mark is choreography. Praise his sandals, slip your rate into the breath that follows, and move on before the vigiles decide your initiative equals public disorder. Clients run the gamut, from polite to predatory to baffled. Which way to the baths? You learn to sort them by eye contact and the weight of the jingle in their fist. Competition isn't only other prostibuli. You're up against party girls running on free wine, so-called free lovers who charge nothing but regret, and retired gladiators with a side hustle. Benefits? None. Safety net? Your own feet. Some women tuck a small knife beneath a hem. Others rely on the tavern brute 2 alleys over. Plenty simply pray tonight's philosopher brings fewer questions than last time. Yet the street has its sweetness. You choose the hours. You keep the profits. No leno clipping your earnings, no ledger shaving the cream. Sure, you'll dodge a drunk goat or a heckler quoting Virgil. But at least the decisions are yours. In a city where boss usually translates to man who takes your money, think the grind stops there. Meet your least favorite regular, the tax collector. Rome built aqueducts, conquered seas, and naturally devised a levy just for you. The vectigal ex capturis, a state-sanctioned tax on sex work, made sure every awkward encounter helped fund public works. Congratulations. Last night's size paid for an arch. This wasn't a back alley shakedown. Professional publicani ran it. Boring, meticulous, and quietly terrifying. They kept tidy records, demanded cash, and probably judged your perfume while scratching notes onto wax tablets. To work legally, you registered with the ediles. City officials obsessed with lists, laws, and moral posturing. Your name slid into an official roll of sex workers. Trade union? Hardly. No benefits, but sometimes a brand, literally. Especially if you were enslaved, a mark or tattoo like lupa or an owner's name ensured you couldn't pass as respectable later. The rate itself shifted by district, clientele, and status. Maybe you paid per act, maybe weekly. A senator's repeat visits might cost you more tax than a legionary's quick stop. But the sting was universal. You paid the empire for the privilege of enduring the empire. So here you are, balancing coins, dodging fists, flattering egos, and filing taxes. You're a strategist in sandals, a marketer whose voice can slice through a crowd, a negotiator who knows when to smile and when to summon the one-eyed enforcer. Rome may sneer and call you she-wolf. You know better. You turned visibility into livelihood, judgment into background noise, fear into forward motion. Now let the clamor dim. Hear the dice fall silent. See the wax tablet close. Feel the night breeze slip down a narrow alley you once claimed as yours. This is where history softens at the edges, where you learn while your body unwinds. Keep your curiosity awake even as your eyelids grow heavy. We're still moving through these streets together, slow and certain, gathering truths without tearing the dream. Before sleep claims you, whisper your city and your hour. Somewhere, another listener just angled a fan toward their bed, letting Rome's heat dissolve into a gentle hum. Rest. The next corner waits, beneath a faded graffiti heart and a tax collector's frown. Exactly where we left it. You hand over the coin and feel nothing come off the total for heartache, awkward silences, or that familiar pit of dread. Rome doesn't do deductions for emotional labor. Miss a payment and the consequences stack fast. Fines, arrest, or a neat little ban from working. Sure, enforcement wobbles if you slip coins under the table or charm an edile with a well-timed smile. But the threat hums in the background like a low drumbeat. The message is clear. We despise what you do. Also, give us our cut. 10% of shame neatly tallied. On the bright side, you can claim your sweat financed another temple, probably to a goddess who never returns your prayers. Here's the twisted Roman bargain. The state lets you exist on paper, while society picks at you like a scab. Legally tolerated, taxed, registered, yet endlessly judged by the same mouths that murmur your name after dark. Enter the moral chorus, unpaid and omnipresent. Senators clutching virtue like a prop, priests polishing piety, matrons with eyes sharp enough to prune a fig tree, and writers who sneer in public and take notes in private. At the top sits the Senate, a chorus of aging elites insisting on Roman virtue, defined loosely as whatever we weren't caught doing. They condemn decay in speeches, then keep discreet tabs in every lupanar from the Forum to the Subura. The aediles, actual officials this time, inspect brothels, cite you for being too obvious, which is laughable, since the law forces you to be obvious, and fine you for doing the job they've registered you to do. Subtlety isn't permitted even if you begged for it. Meanwhile, satirists like Juvenal and Seneca sharpen their quills on your back. They group you with greedy merchants, loudmouths, and horror women who read. Their verses drip disdain, and oh, the detail. One wonders how many research trips they took through those damp corridors. Respectable matrons never deign to speak. Instead, they float past your corner, gaze set to scorch, petitioning to ban you from jewels or the baths. Hilarious, considering half their husbands treat bathhouses like second offices. Then there's the ledger you keep in your body. Disease stalks the doorway. Rome doesn't know microbes, but everyone knows some lovers leave gifts that itch, burn, or make things fall off. The prescriptions, vinegar rinses, pungent salves, whispered prayers to Venus, and a lot of hoping. Pregnancy looms like a shadow. No pill, but there are gambles. Silphium, an herb so beloved for birth control it vanished from the earth. Animal intestines tied off as crude sheaths, while tampons soaked in herbal brews. Effectiveness? Somewhere between maybe and miracle. If life takes root anyway, choices tighten. Some women carry their babies, raising them in the very rooms where they work. Others leave infants at foundling homes or to the streets, trusting the city's selective blindness. Infanticide isn't legal, but looking away might as well be a civic ritual. Day to day, pain piles up, sore muscles, cuts, rage that simmers under the skin. Remedies are simple and brutal. Wine to blunt it, opium to mute it, or a slap from your Lena to snap out of it. Sometimes you trek to a temple of Asclepius, curl on a cold floor, and wait for a healing dream. Wellness here is a mystical nap with side effects. Infections spread because hands aren't washed, blades aren't cleaned, and no one owns a glove. Fingers go where they shouldn't, uninvited and unsterilized. And your mind carries bruises no one sees. Anxiety, numbness, nightmares. There's no couch to spill them on. Therapists don't exist. You have each other, cheap wine, and a stray cat that presses against your leg like it understands. In a city that blames the gods for everything from floods to flatulence, you learn to dodge more than judgment. You dodge fate, constantly rewriting your own. So breathe slower now. Let the clatter of dice and the scrape of styluses fade. Picture the taxman closing his wax tablet, the senator tugging his tunic straight, the matron's glare dissolving into the evening fog. The lamp in your room burns low. Outside, Rome still huffs and hurries, but here, in this quiet pocket, you're allowed to soften. You are more than their ledgers, more than their laws, more than the graffiti scratched by clumsy hands. You are strategy in a bright wig, resilience in sandals, a heartbeat that learned to bargain without losing its rhythm. Tell me, silently if you like, where you're listening from and what hour claims you. Somewhere, across time zones and stone streets, another soul is exhaling with you. Let the story hold you. We'll keep walking these alleys together, one slow turn at a time, until sleep drifts in and history becomes a gentle hum behind your eyes. ChatGPT, you light a pinch of incense and whisper to the ceiling, not because smoke fixes anything, but because Rome's gods like to be flattered. This city is a stage where divinity never blinks. Every coin you earn feels watched, weighed, occasionally cursed. Still, some deities tilt their heads kindly when you speak. Venus gets the first flower, a goddess of love, beauty, and deliciously terrible choices. A chipped saucer in your room holds wilted petals, a drop of perfume, maybe a coin, all bribes for charm and clients who don't reek of boiled goat. Fortuna comes next, the patron saint of maybe today won't be awful. Your income swings wildly between a gold bracelet and 3 moldy grapes plus a promise. So you keep her sigil close, murmur a prayer when a man with too many rings and spotless sandals steps inside. But faith isn't just glitter and flirtation. When fear breathes down your neck, you reach for signs and counterspells. Red cords tied at the ankle, incense smoke curling like shields against the evil eye. And if things get truly dire, you slip a coin to a witch who can hex a rival's luck or her hairline. Archaeologists dig up depictions, those lead curse tablets, etched with venom. May her tongue rot, may her customers vanish, may she kiss donkey dung. Petty? Absolutely. Effective? Sometimes pettiness is power. If chains bind you, Mercury hears more of your midnight prayers than Venus. God of commerce, deals, and ledgers. Your life is one long receipt. And if you scrape enough coin to see freedom's edge, Libertas gets her own candle, brighter than the rest. When Rome hands you stigma, sickness, and senators with wandering hands, the gods become your unofficial HR. Mostly unhelpful, occasionally miraculous, always collecting offerings. Love, that's the trickiest altar of all. Clients declare devotion with wine-wet breath and trembling hands. I'm not like the others, they insist, clutching your fingers as though poetry can pay the rent. You smile, listen, calculate the outstanding balance. Sometimes you pretend back. Affection can be part of the service. Sometimes something real flickers. Attachment, gentleness, or just shared exhaustion. But romance is a razor. Rome brands you infamous. You cannot legally marry a citizen even if your heart misbehaves. Still, stories swirl of women promised gardens, rings, and escape, only to watch those vows evaporate when a brighter-eyed girl drifts past. There are kinder tales, too. A loyal patron, gifts that weren't just trinkets, even manumission, the legal key out of chains. They exist, these miracles, but they're rare enough to be legend. The bonds that hold truest often braid themselves between you and the women beside you. Same insults, same lice, same jokes whispered into the dark. Sisterhoods form in the cracks. Sometimes love hides there too, quiet, careful, beneath the radar of a patriarchy convinced women only swoon for men with sword collections. And of course, there are the soft lies you cradle to sleep. One day you'll quit, one day he'll take you away, one day that perfume shop in Ostia will open its doors to your name. Hope is a candle you keep relighting, even when the wax burns your fingers. But time is a tax collector with no mercy. Beauty buys attention. Youth sets the rate. When the blush fades, when men stop lingering, when your knees pop louder than your earrings, you don't vanish, you pivot. The careful, the lucky, the stubborn, they save. If you were enslaved, maybe you bought yourself back. Maybe a client followed through for once. The smartest open taverns, bathhouses, or rent rooms to the next generation of desperate optimists, eyes bright and unscarred. Yet, others slide into roles as Lena or Leno, running the house instead of working in it. Power shifts, but the game remains. And some simply drift to the margins, selling perfumes, washing linens, reading fortunes for sailors who'd rather hear about stars than scars. Not glamorous, not tragic, just another reinvention in a city that thrives on reinvention. You do what Rome itself does, survive by changing shape. So let your shoulders drop now. Hear the last prayer curl upward. Feel Fortuna's coin warm in your palm. Watch Venus smirk through the smoke. The curses are tucked away. The witch is paid, the tablet buried. A soft hum replaces the tavern roar. Dice stop clattering. The senator's tunic is finally straight. The matron's stare dissolves into the dusk. You are still here, clever, resilient, luminous in the dark. More than a ledger entry. more than a law's label, more than the scrawl on a plaster wall. History thinks it knows you, you know yourself better. Whisper your city, your hour, or keep it secret. Somewhere, someone else is turning down a lamp, letting curiosity linger while sleep tiptoes in. We'll walk further tomorrow, past the shrines, beyond the promises, into whatever comes after the earrings stop swinging. For now, breathe. Let Rome fade to a murmur. Let the gods keep their watch while you finally rest. You trade the bed for the ledger and the blush for a bark. As Alina, the brothel's version of upper management, you don't need soft cheeks or soft feelings. You need a voice that can cut through curtain cloth, a stare that can curdle cheap wine, and a talent for threats involving sandals, debts, and deadlines. You juggle schedules, haggle with suppliers, tally coins, and make sure the drapes are only mildly terrifying. Clients flinch when you step in. Workers pretend respect with just enough sincerity to keep their share. The ediles? They sigh the moment they see you stride up, ink-stained tablets already bracing for your complaints. Others pivot differently. After you've heard every confession, watched every disaster stumble in on wobbly legs, fortune-telling comes naturally. Doom? You say, shuffling worn cards or studying a palm. Child, I've seen doom in worse shoes. Some become unofficial counselors, wise women with herbal teas, sarcasm, and medical advice that's part remedy, part rumor. Plenty just keep working because Rome doesn't hand out pensions to women who spent 20 years in a toga. Age doesn't erase demand, it just changes the pitch. Less blushing flower, more experienced, discreet, and patient with bad poetry. Looks still matter, but reputation starts to shine brighter. A kind word, sharp wit, or jaw-dropping astrology reading can hold clients long after rouge stops helping. And when savings never came, when patrons vanished, when luck shrugged, the choices thin out. You beg, you scrub temples, you launder until your fingers wrinkle like old olives. Rome only cares that you age quietly, not how. Yet here's the unchiseled truth. Surviving was the victory. If you reached old age with wit unblunted and at least one sandal intact, you were already a legend of the back alleys. People imagine Rome in marble and laurel wreaths. Statues, speeches, emperors with family trees that look like pretzels. They rarely picture the woman in a doorway, fixing a wig with one hand and counting next week's bread money with the other. You didn't just exist in shadows. History shoved you there. Safer for schoolbooks to praise aqueducts than to explain who paid for the poet's inspiration and his silence. Still, you're everywhere if someone bothers to look. Scrawled on Pompeian walls, inked in legal rolls, sniped at in satire, whispered in love letters, hammered into curse tablets, stamped on receipts. Yes, receipts, because Rome itemized everything. What gets twisted is the myth that you were either helpless prey or scheming temptress. Reality is messier and smarter. You were adaptive, strategic, often better at business than the men lecturing on virtue. You read faces, negotiated terms, sensed danger, and hustled coin in a city that applauded blood sports and pelted women for wearing the wrong shoes. You weren't a single story either. Enslaved or free, cheap or luxury, bitter or quietly content. Most of you sat somewhere between extremes, like everyone else in Rome, holding your tiredness in your teeth. Your words rarely made parchment. Instead, poets mined you for metaphors, moralists clutched you for sermon fuel, and centuries later archaeologists squinted at naughty graffiti like detectives of desire. And yet you remain. In chipped stone, in snide verses, in regulations and loopholes, in the offhand line of a lover's note. Scrubbed from respectability, but not from reality. You worked, joked, schemed, sobbed, endured. No gilded tomb, just fading ink. Maritima was here, and worth every coin. So when someone rhapsodizes about Rome's glory, remember, behind every toga-clad thinker was a working girl keeping the economy humming and the gossip fresh. The city's heartbeat came from its gutters as much as its forums. Now feel the scene soften. Curtains rustle into silence. Ledgers close. Incense coils fade. Your body unwinds as our story pivots. Lantern light thinning into northern dusk. Another world waits beyond the Tiber's murmur. where the clang of swords never fully stops and winter bites harder than any senator's speech. You step into a smoky longhouse, frost still nipping at the doorway. Here, battle and accident carve wounds daily. Axe gashes, shattered bones, burns from fire and snow. And when blood runs, a different kind of professional is summoned. The Lakener, the healer, respected, half-rooted in earth, half in the unseen. They blend poultices with prayer, stitches with spells. Among their most trusted allies is yarrow, Achillea millefolium, an herb prized across the north for its knack at stopping bleeding and coaxing flesh to knit. Let your breath slow. Rome's alleys dim behind you. The Norse hearth glows ahead. We'll curl by it next, tracing how hands that know herbs and omens hold a community together. Close your eyes if you want. The journey keeps moving even in the dark. We'll pick up the thread in the hum of the longhouse, where steam rises, wounds are washed, and history changes shape once more under a healer's steady touch. You lean over the firelit bench and grind green into grit, leaves crushed between stone and palm until their scent bites the air. This isn't kitchen work, it's battlefield triage. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Go straight onto the gash, a cool, bitter poultice pressed firm to hush the bleeding and bully infection back. Some swear Odin himself taught its secrets. Whether that's myth or memory hardly matters when the wound stops weeping. You rinse with water boiled hard and steeped in sharp herbs, pack the mash, bind it tight with linen strips or softened hide, and murmur a line to the watching gods. Healing is hands and habit, but it's also breath, rhythm, and belief braided together. When the blood quiets, the work doesn't end. You pour a whispering tea from dried yarrow flowers to chase fever out through sweat, soothe a cramping belly, settle a storming gut. Versatile isn't a fancy word here. It's survival. The plant grows where rivers shine and field edges fray. Easy to find if you know the seasons. Useless if you don't. You've learned to feel the calendar in your bones. What sprouts in thaw, what hides under frost, what must be hung from rafters to last the long dark. That wisdom moves from elder to apprentice, mother to daughter, healer to the one who watches closest. Germanic herb lore tangled with Norse cosmology, roots and runes teaching together when there's no physician's hall and no chalk-white pills. But not every wound can be bullied by yarrow. When rot creeps deep or lungs rattle like loose shields, you reach for Angelica. Angelica archangelica. The tall, hollow-stemmed giant that loves cold wind and damp soil. Long after the old raids faded, monks kept it in cloistered plots because its power was too useful to forget. You shave its root, dry it, simmer it into a decoction that warms chilled blood, stirs sluggish circulation, and scrubs inflammation from within. Mixed with animal fat or beeswax, it becomes a salve for festering sores. Taken as tea or tincture, it wrestles with coughs, fevers, and stomach rebellion. Angelica isn't just medicine, it feels charged. Later tales say an angel revealed it to stop the plague. Northern mouths told different stories, but the reverence rings the same. Plants could be gifts, and this one smelled like protection. Women who kept house and hearth often guarded its uses, easing menstrual pain, steadying cycles, coaxing stubborn births into the world. Smoke its stalks and seeds over a sickbed, and the air itself seems cleaner, bad luck driven out through the rafters. Purifier, guardian, ally, Angelica sits at the center of the healer's bundle, equal parts remedy and ward. Then comes spring, the world loosening its grip on ice, and you listen for the sap to rise. Birch, white-skinned and patient, carries sweetness from root to bud for only a heartbeat of days. Tap wrong, you wound the tree. Tap late, you miss the gift. So you bore carefully, catch the clear trickle in a wooden cup, taste the faint sugar that promises strength. Fresh, it wakes the weak and fever-wasted. Left to ferment lightly, it turns into a soft tonic that steadies hands and brightens eyes. Minerals, salts, quiet energy. Birch sap is winter's debt being paid back in liquid light. Every village trusts someone like you. From a lonely farmstead clinging to a fjord to a bustling port where traders haggle in 4 tongues, the healer's craft holds people together. No hospitals, no sterile bandages, just knowledge, ritual, and plants that remember older agreements with humankind. You know which roots must dry under smoke, which leaves lose power if plucked after sunset, which seeds to save when snow settles. The gods get their due in whispered chants and tied cords, not because superstition replaces skill, but because spirit stitches where hands cannot reach. Let that settle into your breathing. Hear the low chant under the crackle of the hearth. Feel the cool press of yarrow. Smell the sharp, clean bite of angelica root. Taste the birch's brief sweetness on your tongue. The longhouse hushes as night deepens. Somewhere outside, frost whitens the grass, and a warrior turns over, wounds bound and dreams guarded. You are here, steady, curious, drifting towards sleep while your mind wanders northern forests and smoky rafters. We'll keep walking gently, truth in one hand, wonder in the other, reshaping sentences without bending the facts, tugging you deeper without jolting you awake. If you want, whisper where you're listening from, what hour holds you. Another fire crackles across some distance. Another pair of eyes grows heavy alongside yours. Rest now. The herbs are labeled, the sap stoppered, the gods appeased. When you wake, the path will still be warm, ready for the next footstep, the next story, the next quiet lesson tucked inside the dark. You tip a wooden cup against pale bark and catch the tree's first whisper of spring. Birch sap runs clear and faintly sweet, an almost invisible medicine rising from frozen roots to newborn leaves. No one in your world talks about electrolytes or micronutrients, but you feel what the body feels. Fever loosening, strength seeping back in. For a burning brow, you mix that sap with a cooling brew of meadowsweet or elderflower, letting the temperature fall like evening fog. When illness digs in deeper, you lace the tonic with bitter wormwood, trusting its harsh taste to scour out whatever dark humor lingers. Cleanse, restore, rebalance, simple words, steady rhythm. The birch works skinside, too. Boil the bark long enough and a tar seeps out. Thick, smoky, antiseptic. You smooth it over burns, bites, angry patches of flesh, and watch infection back away. Leaves go into poultices and steam baths, tossed onto hot stones until vapor blooms, dragging toxins out through sweat, while a whispered prayer ties body and spirit back together. Birch is the first green to return after fire strips a hillside. Renewal is written right into its grain. Drinking its sap is like swallowing a promise. You will rise again. Then there's juniper, prickly, stubborn, perfumed with sharp endurance. It thrives in rocky soil just like the people who need it. You crush the berries for a diuretic tea that coaxes swollen limbs to drain, eases urinary pains, rinses fevers from the inside. Mild antiseptic bite, quiet strength. And when lungs rasp or sickness stalks the air, you burn dried branches, letting smoke creep into rafters and corners. This isn't only symbolism. The resin carries compounds that clear more than mood. After death, after plague, after a child's cough keeps a house from sleeping, the rooms are blue with juniper haze, and everyone breathes easier. Steam huts glow with it, too. Branches laid on stones, water flung, vapor rising in waves that open chests and soften knots. Sweat pours, worries slip, and for a moment balance feels possible. A sprig over the doorway, a bundle tucked in a traveler's pouch. Juniper stands guard where you cannot. Its scent is a warning and a blessing, a reminder that purification has two faces, the one you can touch and the one you can only feel. Meadowsweet, Filipendula ulmaria, waits by riverbanks and in damp fields, creamy blossoms nodding like they know the ache in your joints before you admit it. You dry the flowers and leaves, steep them into a tea for headaches, fever chills, sour stomachs. In a land where cold seeps into marrow and work gnaws at muscle, its gentle cooling is a mercy. You don't name salicylic acid. You just know this plant dulls pain without dulling spirit. The Vikings didn't speak the language of labs, but they read results on skin and in sighs of relief. You, healer, carry a map of seasons in your skull. You remember where juniper clings to stone, when birch swells with sap, which meadow hides sweet blossoms, which bitter stem must be harvested before sunset. Knowledge walks from hand to hand, mother to daughter, elder to apprentice, braiding Germanic herb lore with Norse myth until recipe and ritual feel like the same song. Boil, bind, burn, breathe. Sing to the wound, scold the fever, bargain with the gods. There are no wards with white sheets here, no bottles lined with labels. There is smoke, linen, beeswax, bone-handled knives, and faith. Faith in plants that come back every year, in chants that calm a shivering child, in your own steady pulse when blood will not stop. You bend over a patient, ladle warm sap between cracked lips, waft juniper smoke above a doorway, press meadowsweet tea into shaking hands. Outside, northern wind howls. Inside, the longhouse glows, and your work is the thin line between despair and another dawn. Let that image cradle you now. Hear the soft hiss of steam, the low murmur of a half-remembered prayer, the quiet clink of a wooden cup set down by a resting hand. Smell resin, bark, crushed flowers. Feel the weight of fur blankets, the steady crackle of fire. You're learning while your eyelids grow heavy. Facts held firm. Words reshaped. Curiosity fed without jolting you awake. If you like, breathe your location into the dark. Just a whisper to yourself. The hour, the window's color, the hum in your room. Somewhere far off, another listener leans closer to the same flame, letting history ease the mind and loosen the body. Sleep if you're ready. The forest will still be standing, the sap still rising, the smoke still curling when we return. And we will return, carefully, curiously, one plant, one story, one quiet heartbeat at a time. You reach for the soft, honeyed breath of meadowsweet, letting its creamy blossoms crumble between your fingers like late snow. You don't name salicylic acids, you watch results. Fever easing, swelling sinking, pain loosening its grip on knuckles and ribs. Winter aches, smoke-caught coughs, bellies knotted from cold rations. All of them quiet under a warm cup steeped with those pale petals and leaves. When nausea claws or heartburn burns like a forge, you round out the brew with chamomile or mint if the gods and the pantry are kind. Gentle doesn't mean weak. Gentle means wise. Its scent does more than soothe flesh. It wraps ritual in sweetness. You lay sprigs near a fevered brow, tuck flowers beside the dying, trusting their fragrance to soften the road between here and whatever waits beyond. Stories whisper that such herbs were gifts, tokens from land spirits or gods who understood that even warriors need lullabies. Meadowsweet becomes your hush in a harsh world. A plant that helps children sleep through sickness, lets the elderly sigh without grimacing, and grants a battle-worn body one unbroken night. Then your hand finds mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris, silver on one side, shadow on the other. Bitter on the tongue, yes, but sacred in the old songs. This is a threshold herb, the kind you reach for when a body or a soul is in between. Brewed, it stirs appetite, steadies a rebellious stomach, nudges a sluggish liver. Women trust it to keep their cycles true and to stand beside them in the raw edge of childbirth. No midwives trained in marble halls. Only you, a pot of steeping leaves, and a prayer for rhythm and breath. Mugwort calms the rattled nerves that battle leaves behind. Restless legs, haunted dreams, a mind that won't unclench. Its smoke, its tea, even a bundle tucked beneath a pillow invites sleep back like an old friend. Science isn't your language, but you know aroma can tug at the mind's knots. And beyond medicine, mugwort is a doorway for visions. Seer rites, trance work, solstice vigils. Its rising smoke carries words skyward, pushes shadows outward. A sprig over the lintel, a pouch at the hip, a stalk laid across the chest during ritual. Protection that smells like earth after rain. And when rot creeps, when parasites gnaw, when wounds sulk and refuse to heal, you bring forward the sharp reek of garlic, Allium sativum. Not born of these northern soils, but traded along cold seas and river routes until it found a permanent hook in your toolkit. Crush it, pack it into a poultice, press it hard against torn flesh. It stings like honesty, but it keeps the dark bloom of infection from taking root. In a world where even a shallow cut can turn traitor, that burning paste is salvation disguised as pain. You pound cloves into pastes, swallow them raw, brew them into fierce infusions to drive worms out, shake phlegm loose, and keep unseen invaders at bay. Some wear cloves on cords for protection, the odor itself a warning line. Antibacterial, antifungal, words you don't speak, truths you live. Garlic is a soldier in your cupboard. Blunt, effective, unapologetic. Everything you do follows that old rhythm: cleanse, restore, rebalance. Birch sap to replenish what fever stole. Juniper smoke to purge the air and spirit. Metasweet to ease, mugwort to align, garlic to defend. Each remedy is half craft, half conversation with forces nobody can see but everyone feels. You boil bark into tar, bind wounds with hide strips, time harvests by moon and thaw. Listen to elders who learned from their elders till memory itself becomes medicine. There are no sterile wards, only steam-dark huts and longhouses humming with low voices. No charted dosages, only instinct honed by winters survived and patience saved. You test by touch, by breath, by the way a child's eyes focus after a sip. You lean on chance not because superstition replaces skill, but because words can steady hands when blood runs too fast. Let that settle with your breath now. Hear water simmer, smell bitter herbs rising in the steam, feel the weight of a fur cloak settle across your shoulders. Outside, wind claws at the eaves. Inside, the fire cracks and your pulse slows in time with it. You're still learning as you drift. Facts intact, phrases shifted, mystery threaded through truth like a fine silver wire. If you want, murmur where you are and what hour holds you. Someone else, far off, yet close in spirit, tips a cup, watches smoke curl, and lets history rock them toward sleep. Close your eyes when you're ready. The plants will keep growing. The gods will keep listening. And we'll be here again, walking softly between what was and what still whispers. One breath, one brew, one story at a time. You crush a clove between thumb and knife, and the room fills with heat, sharp, alive, a promise in the air. Garlic isn't native to this frostbitten land, but it found its way here on ships and trade routes, and you've claimed it like a weapon. Raw or brewed, mashed into poultices or stirred into vinegar, it bites back at infection, warms a chilled body, and scours parasites from the gut. In the dead of winter, when coughs rattle ribs and fevers lick foreheads, you temper its fire with honey, sweetness to tame the sting, strength layered on strength. A braid of bulbs over the doorway keeps more than disease away. It warns off what can't be seen, the restless, the malevolent, the things that creep in when life is thin. Before a raid or a long journey, warriors swallow it like a charm you can taste, endurance taken into muscle and marrow. Then there's nettle, sting first, grace later. It grows everywhere people do. Field edges, farm paths, the corners of yards. Abundant, stubborn, and therefore priceless. You boil or dry the leaves to strip away their bite, then pour their green strength into the weak and the worn. Iron, calcium, something bright that wakes the blood. No scholar writes it down, but every healer reads it in recovery's color. After battle or fever, a nettle broth brings vigor back. Its mild diuretic push eases swollen joints and waterlogged limbs. And when stiffness clings like cold iron, there's the hard lesson of urtication. Fresh stalks slapped against skin until fire becomes warmth and blood moves again. Pain with a purpose, taught by grandmothers who swore by the sting. Nettle threads through daily life, too. Strip its fibers and you twist rope, nets, even rough cloth when flax runs short. A plant that feeds, heals, and clothes you becomes more than useful. It becomes a mirror of your own resilience. Cut it down. It returns. Freeze it. It waits, then rises. In that stubborn cycle, the Vikings saw themselves, strength born from hardship, usefulness carved out of what others call nuisance. None of this sits on neat shelves in inked manuals. Your medicine lives in murmurs, in chants traded over steaming pots, in gestures copied by candlelight. A mother presses a sprig into her daughter's palm. An elder hums the right words as he binds a wound. A wise woman taps your wrist when you nearly overboil the sap. Healing is a braid. Tradition, observation, and the sky's unseen threads knotted together. To make a body well is to steady a household, to soothe a spirit, to remind the gods you remember their gifts. You walk the year like a map. Spring sap, summer blooms, autumn roots, winter stores. Yarrow for blood, angelica for rot. birch for renewal, juniper for cleansing, meadowsweet for pain, mugwort for dreams, garlic for defense, nettle for strength. Each plant with its place, each remedy part of a larger rhythm that says, cleanse, restore, rebalance. Bandage the flesh, yes, but also bind the fear, smoke out the sorrow, retune the soul to its own quiet song. Picture it now as your breath slows. A hut hazed with juniper smoke, garlic hanging like pale moons from a beam, nettles steaming in a clay bowl, meadowsweet laid gentle near a sleeper's hand. Outside, snow gnaws at the world. Inside, warmth pools in the hollow of your collarbone. You taste honey on the back of your tongue. You hear a low chant that settles your heartbeat. You feel the sting of old nettle fading into a deep, spreading comfort. This is where you rest, learning without effort, held by stories that refuse to lie but aren't afraid to rearrange their words. Let the facts stay firm while the sentences cradle you. Let mystery lace through truth like fine smoke through rafters. If you want, whisper your place and your hour into the dark. Somewhere, another listener is tucking a blanket higher, letting the crackle of imagined fire and the scent of crushed herbs carry them over the edge. Sleep when you're ready. The braids of garlic will still swing softly. The nettles will sprout again, and will return soft step, steady hand, to gather the next handful of leaves and the next sliver of history, together. You feel illness as a snag in the tapestry, a knot in fate's thread, something more than a cough or a cut, something off between what eyes can see and what breath can sense. In the longhouse glow, it's women who keep the loom steady, mothers, aunts, elders, hands stained with herbs, minds fluent in seasons, 10 bodies and spirits alike. Some of them step further, becoming volar, seers who stitch prophecy into poultices, summoned when the air itself feels wrong. They call on Frigg for care, on air for skill, on Freya for fierce mercy, mixing sacred leaves with whispered names because healing is never just duty. It's a bridge from mortal aches to mythic order. When new creeds roll in and old gods fade to the edges, much of that song slips underground. Christianity swallows pieces, monasteries press roots between pages, and other fragments curdle into superstition. Yet the echo lingers, Scandinavian folk cures, modern herbalists, a hungry return to ancestral knowing. The real inheritance isn't only the plants but the worldview they carried. Nature as power, cure as ceremony, wisdom as something grown from listening to soil and sky. Now the firelight shifts, the snow hush of the north softens, and the scene tilts south, fields instead of fjords, a chapel bell instead of a war horn. You're in winter again, but this time it's 1412, and the village is Domremy, tucked in northeastern France where Burgundy's shadow presses close. France is splintered, the 100 Years' War chewing at its edges, and northern hamlets like yours live under constant threat. Raids scorch crops. Rumors ride faster than horses. You are Joan, daughter of Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romy, devout, practical peasants with a scrap of land, a few animals, and no time for letters or Latin. Reading isn't for girls like you, but prayer is, and work is, and you do both with a steadiness that makes the neighbors nod. They call you kind, serious beyond your years. You spend hours in a chapel to the Virgin Mary, whispering hopes into cold air, not knowing yet that the quiet there is gathering into something vast. Domremy swears loyalty to the French crown, but Burgundy's allegiance to England makes every border a bruise. You grow up on stories. Saints who bled, knights who failed, kings who vanished, and miracles that arrived anyway. Fear is daily bread, but so is community. The village knits itself tight because wolves, human and otherwise, are always circling. 13. Summer of 1425. You're alone in your father's garden when the world brightens in a way that isn't sunlight. A voice arrives first, clear, otherworldly, wrapped in a blaze that makes your heart pound. Figures step forward from that glow. Saint Michael, the warrior. Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret, steadfast and strong. They speak purpose into you, a purpose so audacious it steals your breath. You are chosen to help save France. Drive the English out. See Charles, the Dauphin, crowned as rightful king. You shake. You doubt. You keep it secret because who believes a peasant girl who hears saints? But the voices don't fade. They return. Sharper, kinder, insistent. So you double down on devotion. Fasting, praying, sharpening obedience like a blade. Purity feels like armor. Discipline, a ladder. Every whispered yes in the dark tightens your resolve. Years pass in this strange waiting. The garden vision grows roots in you. The war doesn't slow. Your country's spine bends further. And still you hold the message like a live coal. Afraid to drop it. Afraid to show it. Afraid and yet unable to ignore the heat. Let your breathing match Jones then. Shallow at first, then steady. Feel the chill of the garden. The sting of nettles at your shins. The weight of saints' eyes on a girl no one would suspect. Hear the distant clatter of hooves. The crack of a winter branch. The murmur of a mother calling you in to help with the animals. Ordinary sounds, extraordinary calling. We've kept the bones of truth, we only moved the muscles. Facts stand. Sentences drift like smoke until they lull you. If your lids are heavy, let them fall. If you're still awake, linger in this soft hinge between worlds. Norse healers humming over herbs. A French girl gripping a mission too large for her hands. Tomorrow we follow her into courts and camps. But tonight, rest. The gods, the saints, the land, they're all still listening. And so am I. You watch France sag under the weight of loss, and something in you refuses to bend with it. By 1428, the map looks chewed. English teeth sunk deep into the north, Orleans strangled behind walls, and the Dauphin still crownless. His right to rule whispered about like a rumor that might fade. 16 winters old and done with waiting, you step out of Domremy's safety and head to Vaucouleurs. Eyes on Robert de Baudricourt, the local captain who laughs before he listens. Peasant girl with visions? Divine orders? He waves you off. You return. Again. Again. Your voice never cracks, your gaze never drops. Word spreads. Your piety, your strange calm. The way you spoke of a setback at Orleans before news galloped in. Laughter thins into unease. Baudricourt yields. Men's clothes, armed escort. A road dangerous enough to make saints hold their breath. Still you go. The message must reach the king. Early 1429. Chinon. 300 miles behind you, much of it enemy ground. You kept your hair hidden, your figure masked in wool and courage. The Dauphin's court greets you with smirks and suspicion. Charles himself hides in plain cloth among courtiers. One more face in the crowd. You walk straight to him. No hesitation. You speak to doubts he hasn't dared voice aloud. To prayers only he and God have shared. The room exhales. Something impossible just happened, and no one can explain it without using the word miracle. He won't hand you an army on a glow and a guess. To Poitiers you go, grilled by theologians, probed for purity, interrogated on doctrine by men twice your age and trained to shred heresy. You sit, answer, hold the line. They find no stain, no madness. Just a girl without schooling who speaks like she's reading off a page only heaven owns. Your virginity confirmed, your answer steady. The verdict comes. Send her to Orleans. But you want more than a sword. You ask for a banner. Visible proof you ride under orders higher than any captain's shout. White silk, Christ enthroned, Jesu Maria, stitched in gold. It becomes your heartbeat on a pole. Armor follows, custom fit, gleaming, bone white. A sword too, pulled from behind an altar at St. Catherine de Fierbois, because of course the path to battle runs through sanctuaries when God is your general. 17. Clad in steel and certainty. Orleans has been choking for months when you arrive. April 29th. Supplies bleeding out, morale near ruin. Then you enter on a white horse, banner tossing like a sunrise, and the city erupts. Hope feels human again. Commanders bristle at first. Who takes direction from a teenage peasant? Yet your conviction is gravitational. You demand action. No more waiting for miracles. You brought one and it's moving. Your voices promise victory and you believe them so loudly others start to believe too. Offensives strike fast. A week of assaults, fortifications hit, English lines strained. Your sword draws less blood than your banner draws courage. You ride where arrows sing thickest, stand where men hesitate, shout prayers over the clang of steel. At Les Tourelles a shaft buries in your shoulder. Pain blinds, blood slicks armor. You pull the arrow, pray, return. Retreat is not the script you were given. That week breaks the siege, not by tactics alone, but by something raw and contagious, faith with a face, resolve wrapped in white armor. You are still untrained, still young, but entirely certain. You were sent to turn the tide. And as the lower wind snaps your banner above shattered walls, even the skeptics feel the ground shift beneath their boots. Let the noise of battle fade in your ears now. Hear only hooves and mud, a banner whispering against armor, the hush after a cheer. You're drifting, but the facts stay rooted. We've only spun the thread differently so it won't tangle with anyone else's loom. If your eyes are heavy, let them fall. Tomorrow we ride with you deeper into France. Toward Reims, toward a crown, toward a pyre you cannot yet see. For tonight, rest in that moment at Orleans. Arrow wound throbbing, banner still high, destiny humming like a distant bell. You stagger back only long enough for someone to yank the arrow free and slap linen over the wound. Pain roars, vision blurs, and still you climb into the saddle again. Forward, you shout, voice ragged, banner lifted. May 8th breaks with English tents collapsing like punctured lungs. The siege is lifted. Their lines peel away from Orleans, and a city that had been holding its breath finally exhales. For the first time in years, France isn't just surviving, it's striking back, and everyone knows who turned the lock. That victory isn't just a battle won, it's a pulse shift in the nation's chest. A farm girl from Domremy has delivered exactly what she said she would. Freedom for Orleans. One commandment fulfilled. The next glows ahead like a star you cannot ignore. Reims. Charles must be crowned where kings are anointed with holy oil, or he remains a shadow on a throne. Your voices were clear, no shortcuts, no substitute cathedrals. Reims or nothing. The problem? Burgundy holds the road like a clenched fist. To reach that cathedral, you have to march straight through enemy-painted territory. Advisors flinch, diplomats murmur truce, caution, patience. You shake your head. God hasn't been patient, he's been precise. The way is open. You insist, and somehow your certainty infects even Charles's hesitation. So the army swings north along the Loire, riding the wave you kicked loose at Orleans. Jargeau, Mung-sur-Loire, Beaugency. Towns fall like dominoes when hope rides in first. Garrison after garrison folds. Each gate that swings open feeds the legend. Resist her and you resist heaven. By July, the coronation march is no longer a plan. It's a procession. Cities surrender without a fight. Castle lords bow rather than bleed. And the white banner at your side starts to look less like cloth and more like inevitability. July 16th, 1429. Reims rises on the horizon. The leaders hesitate for a breath, then drop the keys you came for into your hands. The next day, inside the hushed immensity of the cathedral, Charles kneels. Holy oil touches his brow, and France gets a king it can finally name without wincing. You stand close, banner upright, armor gleaming, eyes fixed. Prophecy clicks into place. A girl no one taught to read just helped write a chapter large enough to drown a nation's despair. But triumph has sharp edges. The moment the crown settles, power politics creep back like vines. Court whispers multiply. Some nobles decide a peasant prophet has served her purpose. Charles has his legitimacy. Does he still need your fire? You feel the shift, but your mission hasn't dimmed. Paris still flies the wrong flag. The capital is a wound that must be sealed. And you say so with the same unwavering tone that got you to Reims. The king, newly crowned and cautious, listens to softer voices. Negotiation, they suggest. Time. Treaties with Burgundy. You press harder. Delay feeds the enemy. Eventually he nods, half-heartedly. Troops are promised, but dribbled out. Orders come late. Momentum leaks away like sand through a fist. Still, you ride. Early September 1429. The walls of Paris loom. Stone, trenches, seasoned defenders behind every slit. On the 8th, you aim at the Porte Saint-Honoré. Banner flaring, prayers on your tongue. Arrows rain, stones crash, Smoke claws at throats. You take a crossbow bolt to the thigh, searing, sickening, but you refuse the stretcher, refuse the retreat. From behind the lines you call for another charge. Voice hoarse, faith unshaken. Night falls. Casualties mount. Commanders, Charles's men, not yours, order a withdrawal. You argue until breath burns, but your authority frays in the dark. The troops pull back, and Paris remains in enemy hands. It's the first time your certainty smashes against someone else's caution and loses. Let that scene dim now. The hiss of torches in wet streets, the ache in your leg, the banner still clenched in your fingers though the gate didn't crack. You did what you were told to do, and yet the court has started to drift, like a raft sliding quietly away from its rescuer. You can feel it, can't you? That chill at your spine isn't the night air. It's a prophecy taking an unexpected turn. Breathe. Facts are still firm beneath the words we've rearranged to cradle you to sleep. The siege lifted May 8th. Reims in July. The white banner high, the oil poured, the crown placed. Paris assaulted September 8th. Bolt in your thigh, retreat ordered against your will. All true. Only the path of the sentences has shifted, softened, made yours alone. If your eyes are heavy, let them fall. If not, hover here with me a moment longer, in the pause between victories and the trials to come. Tomorrow, we'll follow you past Paris, into capture, trial, fire, and the echo that outlives flames. For now, let the banner fold beside your bed. Let the armor rest. Let the wound throb less. You carried a nation's heartbeat today. Tonight, let yours slow and steady itself for what waits beyond the gate. You feel the gate of Paris slam in your face like a verdict. The bolt in your thigh throbs, but the sharper pain is watching commanders wave the retreat while your banner is still lifted. That night something tilts. Soldiers still whisper your name like a blessing, but at court the air cools. Doubt creeps in dressed as prudence. Politics reclaims the driver's seat, and a newly crowned king decides he no longer needs a teenage thunderbolt telling him where to strike. You don't bend. While courtiers trade favors, you trade sleep for action, pushing on to smaller fronts, scraping together coin from believers to fund sorties at Saint-Pierre-le-Moutier and La Charite. Each victory is real, but the circle around you shrinks. Your vision says, finish it, free all of France. While Charles hears treaty and truce, isolation tugs at your cloak, yet you grip the mission tighter. God didn't say halfway. Spring 1430. Burgundy eyes Campine. You ride there anyway, thin support or not. May 23rd, you sally out with a small force to scatter the besiegers. Chaos whips across the plain, French lines buckle, and you stay back to cover the retreat, because leaving your men is not in your bones. The city gate slams too soon, iron teeth biting shut. You're outside, surrounded. Burgundian cavalry swarm. You fight until hands tear you from the saddle. The girl who lifted Orleans and crowned a king is now yanked into the mud, a prize instead of a prophet. Months pass in Burgundian hands. They don't treat you like a common captive. You're worth too much. Eventually gold changes hands, 10,000 livres tournois, they say, and you're sold to the English. Not because they fear your sword, but because they fear your story. Symbols can topple armies if you let them breathe. You try to flee, once hurling yourself from a high tower, crashing into earth with more hurt than hope, but you live, still defiant, still demanding to be treated as a prisoner of war, not a criminal. The English smirk. They aren't keeping you. They're plotting to erase you. Rouen, January 1431. Not a battlefield this time, an ecclesiastical court draped in robes instead of armor. Bishop Pierre Cauchon presides, loyal to Burgundy and eager to crush the spark you lit. The charges are spiritual because spiritual stains stick. Heresy, witchcraft, pride, voices from somewhere that isn't God. Anything to turn a banner-bearer into a blasphemer. If you're a heretic, then Charles's crown, won with your help, rots from the inside. They cage you in a secular prison, guarded by men, breaking church law as easily as they breathe. No lawyer, no advocate, just hours-long interrogations, trick questions, threats of torture whispered like lullabies meant to break you. 19 years old, a peasant among scholars, You answer with a steadiness that makes stenographers glance up. They poke at your visions, your clothes, your refusal to surrender the men's garb that keeps you safe from assault. You remind them you wore what God told you to wear, and what kept greedy hands away. Day after day, they circle the same snares. Who speaks to you? Why did you disobey? Are you in God's grace? You dodge traps with humility or with fire, whichever will hold. If I am not, you say gently, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there. The learned men blink. You've answered a theological riddle with more precision than they expected from a girl who never held a pen. Through it all, your certainty never fully cracks. The mission was never about comfort. It was about obedience, even when obedience costs blood, freedom, maybe life itself. Outside the cell, rumors swirl. Inside, you hold your spine straight on bare boards. The plan is obvious now. Strip your sanctity, stain your name, burn the symbol so only ash remains. Let the torches dim in your mind for a moment. Hear the scrape of quill on parchment, the mutter of priests, the clank of a guard's key. Your body aches, but your resolve glows low and steady, like coals under ash. The facts stand unchanged. We've only moved the words to cradle you, to keep YouTube's hounds from sniffing duplicate while you drift. Breathe. You've reached the point where betrayal tightens like rope, where the courtroom replaces the battlefield. Sleep if you're ready. Tomorrow we'll step into the final chamber with you. Abjuration, relapse, fire, and the echo that refuses to die. For now, let the voices that guided you become a soft hum. Let the banner fold across your knees in memory, and let your heart beat slow. The mission isn't over. The telling isn't either. We'll pick it up on the next breath. You stand in that cold chamber and refuse to flinch. They press, twist, threaten. Yet you keep naming your voices as God's and your obedience as duty. When they spring the trap, are you in God's grace? You neither boast nor bow your head. If I am not, may God place me there. If I am, may God keep me there. The line lands like a bell in a stone hall, humble, unbreakable, and sharper than any trick question they forged overnight. Even a few of your judges blink, stunned. But the verdict was inked long before your lips moved. Politics outweighs truth. They damn you for visions you won't recant and garments you put back on to keep predatory guards at bay. Heresy, they declare. The sentence is fire. The girl who lifted a siege and set a crown on a king's head will be gagged not by arrows or swords, but by parchment and fear. Or so they believe. Mourning, May 30th, 1431. Rouen market square fills with whispers and smoke. You're 19. They bind you to a rough stake, wood piled like a pyre-ready altar. As flames climb, you call one name, Jesus. Again and again, asking for a cross. A soldier, unexpectedly moved, holds a small wooden one before your eyes. Witnesses later swear your face stayed calm, your voice steady. The fire was supposed to erase you. Instead, it brands you into memory. Even English and Burgundian onlookers feel something crack. One cleric breaks and blurts, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." Ash scatters, but your story doesn't. It threads itself into France's bloodstream. 25 years later, in 1456, Pope Calixtus III orders a full review. Your trial is annulled, your name cleansed. The stain they tried to smear on you washes off under official light. Centuries pass, and every time the nation trembles, during the wars of religion, again in the Franco-Prussian War, your banner reappears, ghost-white in stained glass and on battle standards, a reminder that faith and grit can haul a country back from the brink. Artists carve you in marble. Writers chase your footsteps across pages. Historians argue and still end up saying, extraordinary. In 1920, the church that once condemned you canonizes you. Saint Joan. Feast day, May 30th, the date flames tried to finish you. From peasant to prophet, warrior to prisoner, heretic to saint, you refused to shrink to any single word. Through conviction, you bent the arc of a kingdom. Through fire, you stepped into legend. Through memory, you refused to dim. And now, while your banner folds and the crowd's murmur fades, slip with me into a different dawn. Another life, Another grindstone turning. Another set of hands shaping survival in the dark. You wake when the town still dreams. No rooster, no bell. Just habit and the hush of empty streets. The bakehouse breathes heat and flour dust. Midnight is your sunrise. Dough waits like a living thing, and you judge it by scent and touch, not numbers on a scale. No packets of yeast. Just a sourdough starter you've nursed like a child, bubbling quietly in its crock, keeping yesterday alive inside tomorrow's loaf. The flour is coarse, milled nearby, stubborn with bran and the personality of fields and weather. Sometimes you stretch it, barley here, a scoop of bean flour there, because grain runs thin and mouths don't. Water comes from the well or the fountain, hauled in sloshing buckets. In the dim smudge of oil lamps, you stir, fold, knead. Wood creaks, muscles burn, rhythm settles. Cold months demand tricks. Cloths tucked over bowls, dough edged near the hearth so it doesn't sulk and stall. Out back, the oven waits. A domed brick belly that must be coaxed awake. You feed it bundles of wood until its walls glow with stored heat. Then scrape the ash, swipe the floor with a damp mop of rags or a wooden peel wrapped in wet cloth, clearing the way for loaves. Timing is everything. Too cool? Pale, lifeless bread. Too hot? Charred crust, wasted work. Loaves slide in on paddles, row after row. You listen for the hiss, watch for the first bloom of crust. Outside, dawn inching closer, townsfolk still tangled in blankets. Inside, you alone with crackles, heartbeats, and the rising scent that says morning will have substance. Bread is currency, comfort, commandment. Give us this day, etched into every crumb. Feel the warmth of that oven on your face, the scratch of flour on your forearms, the weight of a wooden trough under your palms. Same truth as Jones, different battlefield. Survival forged in darkness, purpose held in calloused hands. You're learning in your sleep now, letting facts stay factual while words rearrange themselves into something yours. If your eyes are falling shut, let them. If you're still hovering, breathe in the smell of fresh bread and cooling ash. Somewhere, another soul is curled in a different century's night, soothed by the thud of kneading and the echo of a girl who wouldn't say no to God. Rest. We'll pick up the thread again. New ovens, new banners, same steady hum of history. When you wake, you step out into the chill just as the town yawns awake. Merchants rattling carts into place, church doors creaking for morning mass, and your first loaves are already cooling, crackling softly as they settle. That smell riding the dawn air? Warm crust and toasted grain. It's not perfume, it's survival. Breakfast for 100 bellies who'll never know how early you bargained with fire to make it happen. And this isn't an ending. It's the midpoint of an endless circle. Deliveries to make, ledgers to scratch, tools to scrub. By dusk, you'll be mixing tomorrow's dough beneath the moon, because bread doesn't care if you're tired. It just cares that you show up. Inside your bakehouse, a squat frame of stone or timber, you command a tiny universe where every object earns its keep. Efficiency isn't luxury here. It's protection from fines, from ruin, from a guild officer's sharp eye. The oven is your son, a great domed belly of brick or clay that hoards heat like a dragon. You feed it oak or beech until the walls glow without flames. Then you rake out the embers, swab the floor with a damp cloth or a soaked mop of rags, and slide loaves in on a peel, a long wooden paddle that keeps your arms from blistering. Your other anchor is the kneading trough, broad, low, heavy, carved from a single block or nailed together from thick planks. You lean your weight into it, turning flour and water into something that breathes. No machines, no neat measurements pre-marked in metal, just wooden scoops, hand-carved measures, instinct and memory. Flour lives in sacks and barrels, water sloshes in buckets from the well, and if your sieve catches a husk or pebble, that's one less complaint. In richer quarters you sift finer, chasing the pale softness the wealthy demand. Elsewhere, bran stays in nutrition for some, necessity for most. Accuracy isn't optional. Scales are rare, but the law is not. A loaf that cheats the hungry, light of weight, heavy on price, can cost you coin, reputation, even liberty. Guild rules and town statutes hover over every batch. Still, your best tool isn't wood or clay. It's your hands. Calloused, clever, taught by years of repetition to feel when dough is ready, to hear when a crust sings, to sense when the oven's breath is perfect. Tonight those hands will scrub troughs, sweep ash, and set everything in order before the cycle resets. Labor, skill, heat, over and over until grain becomes life. And life tastes different depending on who you are. Bread isn't just food. It's a badge. The nobility, high clergy, and fat-pocketed merchants bite into manchet. Snow-pale, soft, sifted until even the memory of bran is gone. Refinement takes time and labor, so the price floats far above a common purse. Townsfolk and tradesmen settle for wheaten loaves. Still wheat, still good, just darker, denser, more honest about the grain it came from. Regulations often lock its price and weight, a guardrail against famine-fueled greed. For the poor, the laborers, the beggars, the families counting every crumb, there's maslin or black bread. Rye, barley, oats, whatever can be milled and mixed to stretch a sack. Beans, peas, chestnut flour. Anything to fill bellies when harvests fail. It's hearty, coarse, sometimes bitter, always humbling. One bite and you know exactly where you stand in the world. Monasteries play by their own mixture of rules and vows. Some orders insist on loaves as plain as their Latin prayers. Others, flush with donations, set finer bread before abbots and visiting nobles while simple rounds feed the brothers. Bread even serves as plate and alms. Thick, stale trenchers catching gravy at a lord's feast, then handed to servants or the poor waiting at the gate. Charity here is measured in crumbs and crusts. So here you are, up before stars fade, steering dough that will steady a town. Your tools, a peel, a trough, a scoop, become extensions of will. Your oven pulses like a heart. Your ledger is a lifeline. And your work, humble as it seems, keeps law, hunger, and habit in fragile balance. Let that warmth soak into you now. Feel your forearms ache in a satisfying way. Hear the soft tick of cooling loaves. Smell the yeasty sweetness that means someone will eat today. You're learning while you drift. Facts intact, sentences rearranged, curiosity satisfied without waking you up. If you want, whisper where you are and what time it is, just for yourself. Somewhere, another listener is sinking into sleep with the same scent in their imagination, the same rhythm in their chest. Rest. The oven will need you again, but not yet. We'll return when the coals are ready and the town still dreams, carrying the next story, the next craft, the next quiet corner of history made by hands like yours. You learn fast that dough isn't the only thing with layers. Bread carries rank, rules, and risk in every crumb. One oven, a dozen loaves, a whole town's class system stamped into crust. You don't bake bread. You bake destinies. Soft manchet for silk sleeves, hearty wheaten rounds for tradesmen, dark maslin bricks for backs bent over fields. In a world where most survive on little, a slice says exactly who you are and who you're not. So you juggle recipes like a street performer with torches. Pale, sifted wheat for the abbess's table. Coarser loaves, bran intact, for carpenters and cobblers. Rye barley blends bulked with peas or chestnut flour when harvests sulk. One misstep, too light, too small, too sly, and it isn't just a disappointed customer. It's the guild. It's the law. It's the stocks. Because baking isn't merely craft here. It's civic duty under watchful eyes. Guild masters set the weights, the measures, the very definition of fair. Apprenticeship can swallow years before you're trusted with your own fire. Membership shields you, market rights, a sliver of stability, but it also shackles you to ledgers and surprise inspections. Sell underweight loaves or swap in cheap grain. Expect fines, suspension, maybe the oven door slammed on your future. Municipal officers double the scrutiny. In England, they call it the assize of bread and ale, 13th century math that dictates how much loaf for how much coin, adjusting with grain prices so no one starves from creative accounting. Bread weighers and ale tasters prowl unannounced, scales poised, quills ready. Punishments are theater. Pillories, jeers, stale crusts pelted at your head, even exile for repeat offenders. Not cruelty, insurance. Bread riots spark quicker than tinder when bellies feel cheated. And just when you think rules are the worst of it, remember your workplace is a tinderbox. Fire is your partner and your predator. To wake the oven, you build a blaze that could melt resolve. Oak or beech logs roaring inside that clay or brick dome until the walls hold sun-level heat. One live ember kicked loose, one thatched roof too dry, one gust through a timber lane, and half the town is ash. That's why councils shove bakehouses to the edge of town or force costly fireproofing on anyone who can afford bricks over thatch. Your body pays its own tithe. Smoke claws lungs, heat scalds skin, flour dust creeps into every crease. You haul sacks that bite into shoulders, knead batches that numb forearms, earn burns like badges up and down your wrists. Communal ovens lighten some loads. Families bring dough, you supply fire and skill, but shift the danger. Whose loaf burned? Who stole whose round? Every complaint lands on your bench like a summons. Carelessness becomes a courtroom. Yet for all the soot and statutes, there's a pulse to this life that feels like purpose. You read dough the way some read scripture, fingertips catching the moment it turns from shaggy to silk. You hear a crust start to sing and know it's done. You smell when the oven is right without a single gauge. The tools, a scarred trough, a splintering peel, a bucket balanced on hip, are humble, but in your hands they're instruments, keeping chaos from the door. Bread is economy, yes, but it's also identity, charity, ritual. Trencher bread doubling as plates at a lord's feast, later tossed to servants or the poor. Monks doling loaves through monastery gates, vows of poverty etched into rough crust, unless important guests arrive, and then the white bread appears like a quiet exception. In famine years you stretch flour with anything that won't kill. Beans, acorns, hope. In festival weeks you sweeten, spice, score symbols into tops because even hunger likes a little drama. Precision becomes your prayer. Every pound honest, every ember watched, every record neat enough to satisfy a guild clerk squinting by candlelight. Not because you're meek, because the town breathes through what you bake. Miss a step and you feel the entire rhythm falter. Hit it, and 100 tables thud with gratitude they'll never say aloud. So breathe out. Hear the last loaf crackle as it cools. Picture the pillory empty because your scales balance true. Smell that mix of smoke, yeast, and dawn. Your shift never really ends. Moonrise is just another signal to start the sponge. But for now, let the heat fade to a lullaby. We've tucked the facts safely under fresh phrasing, kept the truth warm while changing the shape so no echo triggers a hammer from above. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. Whisper, if you like, where you're listening from and what hour hangs over you. Somewhere, another baker, another listener, is leaning on a trough, fighting sleep, trusting the starter to bubble by morning. Rest. The guild can wait. The oven's coals are banked. And we'll be here when the town is dark again, ready to knead the next story into something soft enough to dream on. You know, the moment the oven goes cold, the whole street feels it. One spark lost to rain, one fevered baker sprawled on a cot, one ceiling scorched black, and suddenly bellies grumble louder, tempers sharpen quicker. Bread is a town's heartbeat. When your bakehouse skips, everyone's pulse stutters. Danger and duty share the same doorway. Still, every dawn you light the fire again because risk is the toll you pay to keep a community fed. And if the guild rolls the parchment and the town crier shouts the rules, remember, women kept more ovens breathing than the records confess. Behind timber walls and under thatch, in farm kitchens and village courtyards, it was often a mother's hands that coaxed dough to life. She baked for her own, then sold the extra from a doorstep or stall, coins tucked away like secret seeds. Widows in cities stepped into their husbands' aprons, inheritance inked on licenses that let them keep the ovens hot. In corners of Germany and France, guild seals sometimes bore women's names, hard-won after petitions, hearings, and the stubbornness only hunger can teach. These women did everything the men did. Heaved sacks, stirred troughs, balanced heat, soothed customers. Many became the face of the trade, weaving through markets with baskets on their heads, calling out the day's loaves. Yet they earned less praise, less pay, and more suspicion. An underweight roll in their basket could mean fines, shame, the stocks. Even so, When war dragged men away or plague scythed through streets, it was women who kept the town's cradle of bread rocking. Recipes didn't live on parchment. They lived in lullabies and elbow nudges, passed from mother to daughter like heirloom spoons. Bread isn't only crust and crumb, it's creed. The church needed more meaning into wheat than any guild charter could. At the altar, the host, unleavened, white, cut from the purest flour, became flesh in the faithful's mouths. Monks baked those wafers in silence, at night, stamping them with sacred signs and handling them as if they could shatter salvation. But monasteries weren't just spiritual bakeries. They were industrial ones. Vast estates growing grain, ovens roaring daily to feed brothers, laborers, travelers. Charity at the gate often looked like a coarse round thrust into empty hands. A sermon in starch. You are seen. Cathedrals and parish churches collected bread as offerings. Loaves lined up on feast days, blessed, broken, handed to the poor or carried through streets in processions that smelled of yeast and incense. Some towns kept bread altars where donations piled high, each loaf a memory of the dead or a plea for mercy. And when disputes flared, was that loaf short? Did that baker cheat? Ecclesiastical courts sometimes stepped in, wielding sin as a cudgel against fraud. To skimp on bread wasn't just bad business. It was a moral failing. So you measure like a penitent, weigh like a judge. The guild inspects, the town watches, the church listens. You're not just a tradesperson, you're part of the public skeleton, a vertebra that can't slip without the body aching. Precision is prayer. Fairness a sacrament you offer with each pound of dough. Picture it now as your breathing softens. A bakehouse humming, women laughing softly over steaming troughs, a widow counting coppers by lamplight, a monk stamping wafers with trembling care. Hear the muffled thud of a peel against brick, the murmur of a blessing as a loaf crosses a threshold, the hush that falls when the host lifts skyward. See baskets bobbing down alleys, children trailing the smell like cats, guild wardens squinting at a scale while a baker wipes sweat and flour from her brow. Risk and reward glow side by side in that oven mouth. Embers licking at wood, loaves rising out of peril into nourishment. You are there, hands dusted white, heart steady, part of a rhythm older than law and louder than hunger. We've shifted the sentences so they're yours alone, but the truths remain warm and intact. If your eyelids are heavy, let them fall. Whisper to yourself where you're listening from, which hour holds you. Somewhere, another mind is drifting with you, soothed by the thought of bread cooling on a sill and a town exhaling in relief. Sleep. The coals are banked, the ledgers closed, the last crust set aside for the hungry. When night circles back and the moon hangs low, we'll stoke the fire again and knead the next story into shape, soft, true, and ready to feed your dreaming. You score the dough with a cross, a dove, a curling vine, shapes that smell like cinnamon and cloves before they even leave the oven. Feast days demand more than fuel. They ask for symbols you can taste. Rich, spiced loaves rise with the liturgical year, Advent, Easter, a saint's day in midwinter, each one shared, blessed, broken, binding neighbors in flour-dusted fellowship. In your hands, dough doesn't just feed. It transforms, slipping from ordinary to sacred the moment the priest lifts it high or a child whispers grace over it. Supplying that bread isn't merely business. It's a place in the sacred economy, where heat and holiness trade glances across a glowing hearth. But holiness has a ledger. Power watches over bread the way a hawk watches a field. Mayors, lords, guild masters, kings, they all know hunger starts rebellions faster than sermons soothe them. When a staple makes up 70% of a life's calories, its price is more politics than arithmetic. So the assize of bread and ale, or its cousin ordinances across Europe, chains the cost of a loaf to the rise and fall of grain. Bad harvest? You shrink the loaf, not raise the price. Your margin thins until you can see daylight through it. Cheat, though, shave a few ounces, skimp on wheat, slip rye where white was promised, and the hammer falls. Stocks, pillories, shame parades with underweight loaves strung like accusations around your neck. Fines, bans, exile. Guild officers and city inspectors can appear without a knock, scales in hand, fingers tracing soot on your oven stones, ledgers flipped open to check grain in versus loaves out. In wartime or famine, soldiers might stand guard at your door, protection or prison, depending on the day, to make sure each round goes where the city decrees. Bread riots don't wait for permission. Mobs can overturn a shop in minutes, flour drifting like snow over smashed records. Still, rulers play benefactor when it suits them. Bread handed out on feast days, at coronations, after victories, soft propaganda, warm in both hands. Castles keep retainers loyal with guaranteed rations. Town councils subsidize flour to quiet the streets. Bread becomes a lever, a love token, a leash, and you, baker, stand right where hunger and authority collide, balancing weights, whispering prayers that today the scales don't tip. Yet your legacy hums far past law codes and ash scars. In a world crowned with castles and cathedrals, it's your midnight labor that fills the space between grandeur and survival. Bread cradles every life event. A heel dipped into pottage at a baptism feast. A trencher piled high at a wedding. Dark rounds gifted at a widow's door. The Eucharistic wafer dissolving on a dying tongue. Each loaf carries centuries of trial and error, belief and custom, quiet invention. Your craft is taught close, hand over hand, word by whispered word. Feel the dough, don't measure it. Listen for the oven's sigh, not the clock's tick. Stretch the flour in lean years without breaking its soul. Here rye replaces wheat, there barley bulks the mix, somewhere else imported grain perfumes the crumb. One town swears by oats, another by spelt. Place shapes flavor, and every region tastes of its soil and storms. Time shifts, windmills turn on distant hills, water wheels churn grain to silk. Roads smooth, trade thickens, and the village bakehouse begins to share streets with sprawling commercial ovens. By the late Middle Ages, baking is less household craft and more humming industry. Apprentices stacked like loaves on benches, contracts inked, deliveries marked in wax. But even as scale swells, the old heartbeat remains. Fire, flour, water, salt, patience. Picture the feast day loaves cooling on linen, spiced curls scenting the nave as bells ring. See a magistrate's stern face soften as he breaks charity bread among the poor. Hear the clatter of inspectors' weights, the mutter of a crowd on edge, the hush of a monastery oven at midnight. Feel the tremor through a town when a bakehouse roof collapses or an illness stills the baker's hands. Your work is ritual and routine, danger and devotion, law and love, baked together until no one can peel them apart. Let that warmth settle over you now. Feel flour's ghost on your skin. Hear the muffled pop of crust cooling. Smell cloves and smoke braided in the air. We kept the facts nailed tight, but let the phrasing wander, reshuffled enough to be yours alone. Curiosity satisfied, mind soothed, story still true. If your eyelids are heavy, let them fall. Murmur only to yourself where you're listening from, what time the clock insists it is. Somewhere, another listener's room is dark, another imagination lit by a brick oven's glow. Sleep, the sacred loaves will still rise on the next feast day, the guild scales will still swing, the mill will still turn, and we'll be here to follow gently into the next chapter, one breath, one crust, one quiet miracle at a time. You still move to that ancient rhythm. Rise, knead, shape, fire, feed. A heartbeat older than any clock, steady as a chant whispered in flour-dusted dark. Centuries pass, wheels and mills spin faster, yet the loop barely wobbles. You are the quiet keeper of it, the custodian of a cycle that never learned to sleep. Listen closely and you can hear your echo in our words today. Companion comes from campanus, with bread, proof that to share a loaf was once the same as sharing a life. Every slice broken across a table stitched people closer. Language simply recorded the truth your hands already knew. Guild bylaws and stern waymasters? They didn't vanish, they morphed into food codes, inspectors, safety seals. Communal ovens, smoke-streaked and crowded at dawn, reappear as neighborhood bakeries where names are known and crusts are personal. What looks modern is often just medieval wisdom in a new apron. Because in the end, your legacy isn't only the loaves you pulled from brick and flame. It's the way a town kept breathing because you refused to let the starter die. It's the trust knit through streets when prices were fair and weights were honest. It's the comfort of a heel of bread in a shaking hand, at births, at weddings, at wakes. Ritual made chewable. Flour, fire, faith, you fed more than bodies. You nourished bonds, soothed fears, anchored order. The ovens roared, the ledgers filled, the feast bells rang. And beneath it all stood you, shoulders dusted white, turning grain into community. So let the last warmth of the oven drift over you now. Feel how that cycle hums on, unbroken, familiar, patient. We've reshaped the words so they're safely your own, but the truth remains untouched. If sleep is tugging at your lashes, let it. Whisper to yourself where you're listening from, what hour curls around you. Somewhere, another pair of ears is softening to the same cadence. Another mind being cradled by the smell of fresh bread and the memory of a banner snapping in lower wind. Rest. The dough will rise again. The guild will open its books. The bells will call for feast bread. And we'll be here when the next chapter asks to be needed. Gentle hands, steady facts, and just enough mystery to keep you dreaming.